You're listening to The Adventuring Party, talking about gaming the Irish way. Welcome to the party. I am Savage.
I'm Owen.
I am Scarr, demon-slaying warlord.
And I'm Dave.
And you are joining us for episode 666. We'll put in a bunch of reverb there, right? Okay. So, and you probably gathered from the title already, we've decided to dedicate this landmark episode to devils and demons in role-playing. And, a few other places as well. Because...
everyone forgets Yugoloths to their ultimate downfall.
They'll eat last, but they'll eat well. Obviously, devils and demons associated with ritual and occult magics. So we're going to take a look today at where they pop up in our favourite role-playing games and elsewhere in the medium and the surrounding media. The history of association between role-playing games and devils and demons goes all the way back to the core material. And then in the wider public imagination, there's been a few times when the associations have been more troublesome, if nebulous. Okay, so how do we start with this? We should probably define a devil and a demon, right?
Well, I like the sort of generic term fiends that has propped up recently. It covers both, but we probably should discuss the sort of dichotomy there, because the difference between a demon and a devil, while not specific to D&D, well, people might think it's specific to D&D, but actually it sort of deals with two different archetypes, I guess.
Indeed it does. But the distinction being that devils deal and demons don't. In most popular culture, a devil obviously with whom Faust dealt. Demons of a more sort of destructive character. I think is a good way of delineating the two forces. D&D has a lot to say about the delineation between the two, primarily alongside the alignment chart.
Yeah, it's this idea that these two things are sort of the epitomes of evil, but they represent different sides. The demons as the sort of destructive, chaotic, corrupting force that just shoots from the hip. It doesn't really worry about. It just wants to consume and destroy. Whereas devils have a plan. They have a goal. They're doing this not because of alignment axes or something. They're doing it because they know they're right. That what the world really needs is someone to make everyone take a knee, or bring everyone to heel and whip them into shape, and that'll get the multiverse working properly.
Indeed,
with
somebody always
the inevitable return to heaven to kick out all those no goods who kicked them out in the first place.
Like, devils and demons being in D&D is a legacy of the early Christian influence on D&D, where you had, like, a bunch of cleric spells are based on, like, Jesus' miracles, and, like, one of the early D&D characters was Saint Cuthbert, right? Where he was basically Cuthbert the cleric, who basically became a saint and had kind of saintly powers. And so they went, okay, well, we need to have, like, if we've got angels and stuff in here, we should also have devils or demons. And later on, I think circa Planescape, it really formalised the two sides into the Blood War, right? The devils versus the demons.
I think there was hints of a blood war before then, but yeah, it was Planescape that really focused it down to this sort of ideological, fundamental conflict over what is the point of evil, essentially.
And then it kind of gets formalised then later in the only, hang on, the demons are chaotic evil, the devils are lawful evil, and the daemons are neutral evil. And you'll see those in, basically a bunch of different iterations. Like in Pathfinder, for example, the devil's whole thing is corrupting people, their contracts. Their whole thing is, Mephistopheles wrote was the first contract that bound the world into law. So their whole thing is, okay, we're going to, draw people into contracts and get advantage over them that way. The demons want to destroy everything because the destruction of order is their goal. And the daemons want to destroy absolutely everything. They want the world to end in nothingness. They're nihilists. So you can cut out different slices for them in the old pie,
This, of course, leads to a certain paradox where if you look at the alarming chart, and obviously the devils and demons occupying the evil end of the spectrum, then we've angels and such forth on the other side. But if you follow these things to the logical conclusion in the Blood War in D&D, which is peculiar, it's a planar thing, so I suppose it could be found from any D&D setting. You could eventually get to the Blood War, but you basically end up with a status quo that means the angels, the force of good, really need the devils to continue to forge contracts, to supply soldiers for the Blood Wars, to keep the demons at bay, who would otherwise destroy everything. It's like...
Yeah.
It's a bit of a fantasy Cold War vibe to it.
Yeah. You could really... So if you're putting your own spin on demons and devils into your game, you really need to think about those terms as just like, are these demons just sort of there, or do they represent some kind of cosmological constant? Like, is the fact that Asmodeus or Satan or whoever is down there taking people's souls, is that a problem for the forces of goodness? Or is that just part of the plan? Is that just one of those compromises they done to make sure everyone gets to breathe and live and reproduce and all that? Like, these are the kinds of things like you want to like. Is the world so flawed, even in God's perfection, that the demons have to exist?
Who's this God? Who's this God guy you're talking about?
Yeah, that's part of the...
Because it is the Judeo-Christian sort of hierarchy of angels and demons, absent of the two main players. There's no Lord in heaven, and there's no Satan or Lucifer. At least, if he's mentioned, as one of many, perhaps top dog.
In a monotheistic setting, devils and demons, everything can only exist for the permission of God. So God must have a use for them or a function for them to follow. In a pantheistic setting, they can of course exist because everyone's not necessarily powerful. There's no one God or coalition of gods maybe strong enough to get rid of them entirely. And often they may indeed have another function. So it's one of those things. There was a film involving Nicolas Cage where he played the poet Virgil escaping from hell. Well, not quite the poet Virgil escaping from hell.
Gotta see that.
Drive Angry.
Oh, right.
In which, that's what his character is. He's not the poet Virgil, but he's named for the poet Virgil. And that's the thing about it. And there's a bit where he escapes from hell with this gun that the devil owned, and he's going out to kill this devil worshipper who's otherwise immune to everything else because he's kidnapped his granddaughter. And this guy, the accountant, comes out after him, and there's all these people who are dedicating sacrificing children to the accountant's like, oh my God, I work for the devil. He's a nice man. He's an administrator. God put him in charge of hell. This stuff disgusts him. And so the whole idea of like the hell's a prison, and
he's running it.
And he's running it, and probably the devils and demons are the wardens and the guards, who are often not nice customers. Sometimes not nice customers for love. Sometimes very nice people. Like it would vary, but that puts them in a kind of a human role of we need a prison in the afterlife. Now you can wonder why you need a prison in the afterlife, but that's one way to take them.
They've got a dirty job and someone's got to do it. Now, of course, all of this talk of the Judeo-Christian influences, and when we sort of squirrel it out and see how difficult it is for D&D's devils and demons to operate without the big guy, it kind of leads me back to sort of some of the fundamental problems that arose from discussions of these topics in D&D back in the 80s, which was the moral panic around the relationship between D&D and the occult, the sign of the beast, 666. Now that we've kind of outlined roughly what devils and demons are in role-playing, we talk about that a little bit? I'm sure some people here have vague memories of how this went down.
Can't say I've seen any evidence of it, like, personally.
Well, the Satanic Panic is primarily US phenomenon, right?
Yeah.
Like we would never, like, you might get the, like, generally speaking, the Catholic Church in Ireland was very controlling, but, I mean, like, would RPGs have even blipped the,
no, not
pinged on the map, you know, for us?
Not particularly, but because we are an English-speaking country and take many cues from
absolutely
other English-speaking countries. If you were getting into role-playing at the tail end of this period, having been born more or less during the inception of D&D, you might have, it certainly for me at least, it coloured some of my perceptions of role-playing. And it certainly coloured my parents' perceptions. They were old enough to have absorbed some of this nonsense from the States. It should, for those of you who are who haven't broached 40 yet, the Satanic Panic in the States has a lot to do with disappearing children, teen suicides, and links being made to satanic groups and playing D&D. D&D obviously was growing in popularity amongst what would now be regarded as nerd culture. There wasn't the same kind of availability of information that there is now for concerned parents or guardians, and it didn't help that Gary Gygax himself was sort of throwing an aura of mystery over even the contents of some of these books. If you're listening to our tome of Gygax stuff, did we release that one yet? No, perhaps we didn't. We'll get to it. Coming soon. Coming soon. So all of this kind of creates, and of course, it's something the kids are doing, and people don't understand what the kids are doing for fun. So naturally, suspicion arises. In much the same way that after Columbine, the focus fell on things like violent first-person shooters like Doom as a scapegoat. This wasn't helped along with the fact that US law enforcement in certain areas took a keen interest in this supposed link and started to see the influence of D&D in everywhere. It didn't matter that there were no cultists in the woods, much like the lack of Reds under the bed in the 50s. It turned out that there wasn't actually any boogeyman to be found. But certainly that stigma stuck with D&D for quite a while, even and bled over into related games like Magic the Gathering, who, once it became popular, the same sort of attention was focused on it, and cards like Demonic Tutor had to be removed from sets or reprinted or renamed. So there's always been this, primarily because of the sources role-playing games draw from, and secondary way because of the need for moral panic around whatever kids are doing when there's a doubt in parents' minds. There's been a long association between role-playing games and their ilk and something slightly occult, something slightly suspicious.
But it's mostly because RPGs tend to beg, borrow, and steal from every culture and idea for. I need an idea for a monster. Oh, let's use this thing. I'll go here and get how about this floating head with intestines from Japan, or how about this horned scaly thing from a European myth. And what it's doing is sometimes people find that like everyone's you'll always find someone who can find offense in whatever you've done. And it just so happened that the people involved were fairly powerful and could go, okay, hang on, this is bad. They're kind of taking and making a mockery of stuff that isn't in our faith, but is certainly our faith adjacent. And it's a bad sign, and let's whip up the followers and get everyone annoyed. I mean, I'm glad that sort of behaviour doesn't happen anymore, but
wait until someone cracks open the Monstrous Manual and goes, that monster's culturally appropriated. That monster's culturally appropriated. I mean, it shows up in different forms.
D&D culturally appropriated Christian dogma to create monsters for themselves. If you're going to use that as a term. People got upset because they saw them as being mocked. It's much like the Life of Brian, where they were accused of blasphemy. And I think Terry Jones said, it's not blasphemy. We don't say he's Jesus. We, in fact, clearly say he isn't Jesus. It's heretical, but it doesn't it doesn't alter or change the dogma of the faith. It's adding an apocryphal tale that happened at the same time as Jesus. So it was heretical, but blasphemy would have been speaking directly against God. So, it is this sort of thing where, is this blasphemous? Is this heretical? Nah, not really that important, but it's the classic, okay, you're infringing on our racket. And, that's often what it is. You're infringing on our racket, and you're not paying the obeisance, or we're not getting a financial benefit out of it, so, time to create a financial benefit.
I think one of the lingering aspects of the moral panic in the States was you have all these disclaimers from many years afterwards in RPG books, like in the 90s, even going into the 2000s, such as although this book deals with diabolical subject matter, is not in any way intended as an incentive for devil worship. Like that sort of thing.
Yeah. Because there are those who find it very hard to draw clear distinctions between what is real and what is not. And that is probably the most sympathetic airing we could give them. Anyways,
it does raise the thing is just like, do you need to have explicitly? I feel like when we talk about the cultural appropriation thing, it brings up this interesting thing that in a lot of ways people feel, white American RPG writers feel more comfortable just stealing Christian themed or Christian based mythologies for their demons and such, rather than look into alternative takes in fiction where things are a bit more confident. You see stuff like animism being used an awful lot, and a demon in an animist society is just sort of like this nature spirit that's gone bad. Or
I think demon's origin word is nature spirits, and one or two games use that. If you played Gloomhaven, the board game, they've got all these elementals, but they're all called demons. And you think, does that mean they're all from hell? No, they're all nature. They're basically elementals, but they're called demons because that was what our elementals originally were. And you can force you to examine some of your preconceptions. Oh, that's a demon. What does that mean? Oh, they're a force of elemental power that's drawn together and given sentience. To do with the devil? What the hell is the devil? Yeah.
Yeah, there is a sort of a co-opting by the early sort of Judeo-Christian proponents to be like, look, if it ain't on our side, it's we need a word here, boys. A demon, right? Okay. And it works for Satan, and it's definitely bad news. Certainly, don't leave out plates of milk for it. That sounds awfully like worship.
Yeah, I mean, you think is if you want to make a novel or slightly less cliche take on demons, you could do stuff like that. You could have animism. You could have dealing with demons be part of regular everyday life. It's if your house has 6 doors, demon will come after 6 years or something. So you better get the local temple to put up wards or something. And one of the things you could do is you can sort of gauge how much devils feature in the setting. It's just you go from they're wandering around all the time, and you need people to deal with them, to they're off fighting the blood war or whatever, or chewing on the dying corpse of a previous god or something. They don't care about this human stuff. Every time some idiot with a bell, book, and a candle starts mumbling mumbo jumbo, they're not angry because mortals are inferior life to them. They're angry because they were in the middle of something and you've brought them into your bedroom for some reason.
The equivalent of getting them out of the shower to answer the phone.
Yeah.
Okay, I love that. Let's move on to some listener questions. I canvassed some of our members of our Discord, joined our Discord, for some ideas for this episode, and we got a couple of interesting questions. Not to mention some requests, but we'll deal with those in a moment. So let's go first to Mr. Target, who says this. Given that in fantasy RPGs the eternal torment of hell is objectively real, and there's clear paths for winding up there, why are there so many bad guys? Why would you worship a demon/devil/evil god if it's an objective fact that you're going to literally wind up damned for eternity? Or is damnation inevitable? Are fantasy RPGs just the good place with number crunch? So,
well, climate change seems to be inevitable, and yet I don't see an awful lot of people putting in their cars. COVID has been crossing the globe, but I don't see certain people putting on masks. Like, the assumption that just because something is definitely going to have horrific consequences and damn one's eternal soul does not necessarily mean people will suddenly be angelic in Mien.
unfortunately, true. Yeah.
Like, the thing is, if you go and offer someone, you can have this much, but there'll be terrible consequences, a bunch of people will go, well, sure, give me that much. Which is a great way to get players in trouble. If you ever want some gameable action off this, you can have the guy, he doesn't necessarily need to appear evil, he doesn't need to have a forked beard and a set of devil horns and carrying a trident and whatever else. He can just be someone going, I can get you out of this. Basically, this is what you just need to do this.
Here's the easy option.
You don't even need to make it sign in your contract. You can make it something else. There's like, no, I got you. And they're like, well, you know you don't. And it's like, okay, well, maybe you think I'm wrong. We'll see after you're dead. And maybe many players are like, whatever, I don't care about my character after I'm dead. But maybe some characters are like, uh-oh, I might need to get out of this. Like, it can't work like that, can it? And he's like, oh, yes, it can. Like, for example, in L5R, their interpretation of devils are Oni, who are kind of formless masses of evil from the realm of evil Jigoku, and an Oni is just a mass of kind of stuff and not very dangerous. But if you give an Oni a name, it can draw on that name's power and become stronger and more powerful. And the more important the person's name, the more powerful the Oni. So the whole thing is, everyone's like, oh, so how do you get an Oni? So you give it your name. And they're like, why would anyone do that? I said, well, you get a lot of power and knowledge out of it. And they're like, okay, but, that seems like a terrible idea. And one of the lesser known clauses in that one is, you can give the Oni a name if it's your name, or if it's the name of someone who owes you their life, which includes any lord can give any samurai's name. Oh. Because their samurai is owed their life. And if someone owes you their life, you can give the Oni their name on their the name on their behalf. So if you want to do something like that, you could do a plot where, oh yeah, there's an Oni running around with your name because your lord's a wrong one. Or this person saved your life. They gave that Oni your name, so you've got Oni, you got an Oni with your name running around doing stuff. What are you going to do about it? And also you're accumulating Shadowlands taint because you got an Oni named after you. So, the whole idea of bad choices is very gameable. Because players will make bad choices to get out of bad situations. And that generates further bad situations for them to get out of.
Or if you're interested, simple greed. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's always something you can dangle in front of someone's nose and go, do you want this? And they go, yes. I said, okay, well, here's the price tag. I'm not going to tell you exactly what's on it, but here's the price tag. You want to take it? Feel free. And it can sometimes come off as the GM being a jerk, but it's actually the GM trying to generate plot and generate stuff going on and investment from the players. Don't feel bad about it. So long as you have a plan for the player, or you have an idea of ways for the player to get out of it, or some suggestions about how the player can get out of it, or an adventure the player can do to get out of it, you've just generated some plot. Do not feel bad about entrapping a player in a devil's bargain, especially one that isn't fair. Because that'll drive the sense of the player wanting to get out of it. He goes, hang on a second, I didn't agree to anything. He said, yeah, but your dad did. my dad can't do that. In this universe, your parents can agree to these deals on your behalf.
I don't know who my father is.
A lot of great comedy animas start with, and then somebody signed over someone into a deal. Like, this guy gets signed into the Yakuza. You're like, I'm like, yeah, but your dad's a wastrel gambler who, and he signed you over to him, and now you work for us. And that's great fodder for a player in some way, because they can rail against the injustice of it, because they've genuinely been done hard, and that motivates them to get out of it. to break out free of these shackles that other people have forced them into. That's good. That's good gameable content.
We worked so hard to get into that Lord's good graces so we could have noble titles, and then he'd sold our names to the Oni.
He seemed awfully eager to recruit, didn't he? And we took it. We took the rice bowl when we were offered it. So that's fascinating. The way it's dealt with in the obviously with the difference between demons and in the Asian cultures, versus the Judeo-Christian. So if we look at Mr. Target's observation from the Judeo-Christian time, and I'm again kind of specifically thinking of D&D as written, I read it and thought, well, yeah, people do bad things even when they know what the consequences are. But, as he points out, it's objectively real hell, and you can definitely go there for what you do. However, I would say, based on the way they set up these sort of underworlds, the badder you are in life, the better off you are if you know you're going to hell, because you get a better position. You don't want to be started as a low-level muckraking demon. You want to have definitely been a murderer and a villain and a razor of towns. Hell, cities if you can get away with it. Because the more scalps you arrive with under your belt when you finally do croak, the better off you're going to be. You'll become a much better or a juicier sort of demon, depending on your particular portfolio of awfulness. So
hell's not a prison; it's your new job.
Yeah, if you
career opportunity.
Yeah, and you want to be studied up on all the different ways of being bad before you croak. So
also, if you're in a fantasy RPG, presumably you're trying to figure out some way to live forever. Like you're thinking about this whole lich thing, or you're trying to figure out how to get the sacred stone of invulnerability. Pull out your heart, put in a new stone heart. Something like that. One presumes that if you're a sufficiently bad guy, that you're thinking ahead, and you've got long-term plans on how you're going to deal with this whole dying thing.
Well, what I'd say to that is, what's so great about the material plane? Like if you figure that, okay, another 1,000 kills, and I'll get wings when I die. Like this, that'll be much better. I don't have wings now. I could definitely do it wings.
Flight's handy.
Time to go knock over a small country.
Yeah, and depending on like how in tune you are with this whole hell's cosmology, maybe you've got like a preference. Maybe you're like, I don't know about this Demogorgon guy, but this Orcus fellow, he sounds like he's got something on. Or, well, I do like my money, so maybe just getting in with the Devil Lord Mammon would work out for me in the long term. It's an investment. You could. That's maybe why you joined that cult, is because, well, that marks my soul to the demon lord that I think is the coolest, and that means I'm definitely going. I have secured my place in the afterlife. I just need to work on going up the ranks.
Position, yeah, it's a job market after all. I do love that idea that you would encounter as a player group, you'd encounter a bad guy who is just trying to be as bad as possible without any thought to the consequences here, because they've got their eye on the golden circle in the next life.
Like, some of the worst atrocities are done by people trying to impress their boss.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the thing is, if you genuinely had a through line on a demon, and it was like, no, this guy's got potential. He's a loyal servant. He'll be in life. He'll be a loyal servant after it. And you can definitely see someone going, no, I've got a genuine chance here, but I've got to do as much damage as I can in the right way to earn my slot. Yeah. And you can have someone he's not being necessarily going, he'll be betrayed at the end. He might be. Like, you might kill him, and then why does he show up? He showed up as a powerful demon then, because your man followed through on the deal. And that's the
And don't forget, a lot of these demon lords are recruiting. They do need their infinite armies of hellspawn to fight this blood war. So everyone involved has an incentive to keep the economy going, as it were.
Okay, so we've looked at a few of those. We move on now to Zauseed, who has hosted with us on occasion, and he has a slightly different request. He says, I want to hear about how to make demons and devils properly scary, rather than just repainted humans with a bunch of magical resistances. And what
Yeah,
and what does the group recommend on how to make going up against demons or going up against devils feel different?
This is one that really resonated with me because like I'm very disappointed in like Fifth Ed's take on demons, because I came in at Third Ed, where, annoying as it was, every devil had like a rake of spell-like abilities that they could do it, including and especially the ability to teleport without error at will. This was just a thing. It's just like, anytime a DM could just go to the other side of the planet and start messing with stuff over there anytime he wanted. It was cool that it made that even having a single demon who was not bound, free in the world, could have all kinds of horrible consequences. And that was just something they had back then, presumably so that Gygax could, menace his players appropriately. And they took it away in 5th Ed, and most of the demons in the thing are just like big bags of hit points with magic resistances. And it just doesn't have the same feel. Now, there's nothing wrong with having the Minotaur demon, the Goristro. There's nothing wrong with having him just be a gigantic thing that crushes everything. But, that shouldn't be just the rule. You really want to lay on the fact that this is something from beyond reality, and having it around sort of strains on things. Like, something has been unleashed that was supposed to be bound, or something that is beyond mortal ken. And like resistances and toughness and high damage, that kind of does that, but it shouldn't be your first stop, as it were.
Right. Anyone else want to sort of suggest? Okay, devils then. What do we do to make devils more creepy or scary?
Not playing by the same rules as mortals or mortal creatures is a good overriding philosophy, I think. As in, wait, that can't do that. No, they can't. They can. They're not of this world. They don't. They disobey the natural order. They rebel against it even. I think I'm trying to. It might be in Nomine that has this, but But there's at least there's creatures who, like, the ground rejects, or maybe I'm misremembering, but that sort of thing.
Yeah, they can fly because the ground will move away from them.
That sort of thing, yeah.
Or can walk through walls because this wall isn't at the right angle. There's also, like, if you just have like your standard horde of big lads with red skin and horns just running around, well, yeah, that's going to be somewhat ordinary, but like, look into, read up on your Goetia, your Lesser Q Solomon, and see what kind of stuff there. Like Buer, the demon lord who is like just a wheel made out of lion parts, and right. Commands 5 legions and can cure the sick, but also cause you to never win at gambling again, and stuff like that.
Yeah, so
or 7 spinning wheels, each with an eye on it, sort of thing.
Yeah, take away the relatable sort of 2 legs, 2 arms, 2 heads thing, and really, really go for the weird and the odd. The sense that what you're seeing of this thing is only a part, and a part that is only barely relatable at that.
If you want your monster to not seem like a human in a wig, I think there's kind of 3 ways to go about it. You can make it sort of the unknowable cosmic horror thing, where you're only seeing kind of a bit of them, and what you're beating back is just like a fragment of that devil or demon, it's some unknowability. Now the problem with that is you lose out on a bit of the kind of human interaction stuff you can do with something that's a bit more comprehensible. Right? So if you make them totally alien, and you can do that, they often come up as just unsettling and strange, rather than necessarily thing. Now, what you can do is you can steal some animal behaviors from them. I mean, the xenomorphs from Geiger fame, they got there by stealing a bunch of stuff from wasps, implanting young in you that hatch out. You can do the same stuff with demons or devils, that you could say, well, demons, to get into this world, a demon needs to lay its eggs in your flesh. And you can do stuff like that with them, which is, spooky and weird, but also drawn from kind of some weirder biology stuff. You can make them... then you can just try and go, okay, well, they're just really, they're strange. They're very unsettling to look at. They're different, but they're still kind of comprehensible from a person point of view. The other thing you can do is you can take them from some really negative types of human behavior. What you could look at is, okay, there's a manga series called Fearin' at the Funeral, or Fearin' Beyond Journey's End, and it's about an elf wizard who, with her party, kills the demon lord, saves the world, and she goes back to meet them 50 years later, and the male hero who she was kind of in love with is just dying of old age, and she's like, but it's only been 50 years, and they're like, that's a long time for a human. And the human cleric is basically dying of old age as well, and she's like, will anyone be here for the next time it comes around? They're like, no. And she goes off on the journey then with some companions to kind of figure out this whole life thing and like how lifespans differ. One of the things is everything's very humanized, and there's a lot of except with demons. And her whole thing is, no, you kill demons as soon as you see them. And everyone's like, that's a very regressive attitude. And she's like, no, it is not, because the whole thing is demons. This one are really powerful sociopaths. They organize everything around power hierarchy. The most powerful demons in charge. That's it. And they do this whole thing of they have this demon child, and this family is taking her in. Goes, she's just a child. She's fine. And you're almost like, you need to kill it. Mm-hmm. And they're like, no, we can't. It's a child. And she goes, it isn't a child, it's a demon. And they go, no, it is a child. And then she goes, waits, and she waits outside the house. And then in the middle of the night, the demon murders the family and is escaping. And she's like, blasts its legs out from under it. And they're like, oh my God. She goes, mother, please help me. And your one blasts her again. She goes, oh, I was told that one always works. If you scream for your mother just as they're about to finish you, they often hesitate and give a chance to kill them. So you can play them as a total sociopath who just manipulate human behavior, who don't believe in any of it, but only say things like they act like humans, but it's all an act by kind of a creature that's coolly observed you from some distance, but doesn't actually value or really understand what you're going on about, but they're really good at acting like they understand what you're going on about. And just use all those tricks. Use emotionally manipulative tricks. And you'll make players hate them really quickly. You just use all these sob story narratives. And when a player's taken in by them, you stick the knife in very quickly afterwards. And you can make them very hateable from that point of view. Pure sociopaths who are just trying to manipulate you.
Excellent suggestion. Puts me in mind of the Exorcist movies, where you get to see that stuff up close. If I were to address this question, I would say it's the same answer for both devils and demons: possession, but in very different ways. I think with demons are external destroyers. They destroy the external world, and devils wish to destroy your interior self, the internal world. So for a demon, possession might mean to warp the landscape around them. So when they go on these trails of destruction, wherever they settle starts to become more and more warped, and the demon starts to take over the landscape. So as the adventurers progress closer and closer to the heart of darkness, they encounter more and more bizarre things. See Apocalypse Now, and what was that Natalie Portman movie, Annihilation. And then for devils, possession in a more traditional sense, devils can possess people and manipulate them, and then use those well-loved NPCs or familiar quest givers or shop owners, whatever, and just one or two unsettling interactions, and suddenly your players are looking at everybody they know and going, wait a second, have they been possessed? See movies like Legion. Is that I think that was the one. There's a Denzel Washington movie, I think it's Legion.
Fallen.
That's
yes.
a great film.
It is very good.
For a good example of just how crazy you can get with the idea of possession. And the rules of possession might change in your game, depending. But I'd I'd use perhaps those two different versions of possession, of the external landscape and of the internal, the people around you, to have some fun with, to really make either of those classes, demons and devils, quite unnerving for your players.
Back to Owen's point of playing demons or devils as sociopaths. The antagonist in Fallen, you like, he's just so frustrating. He's happy to toy with the characters as well. Like, that's a great example of how to make players hate an antagonist.
And you could get very meta with that one. The devil can possess anybody but the players. And if they ask about it, he's like, oh, well, you're already possessed. And they're like, what? And he says, you're not really, Marbeth the Strong. You're Mick from Chicago.
Love it.
Don't let's play around. Do a little meta narrative on them. Get let them coming and going a little bit. You
want to get real Art Nouveau with that, real French cinema with that. Absolutely.
You can throw a hook, and then what was he talking about? That's just a bunch of stuff they say. They're just trying to get in your head, man.
Yeah.
You just like, whoa, throw a hook occasionally.
Yeah, if you're one of the drama kids and you're the GM, you again play with that idea. Perhaps that in-game devil or demon possesses the GM and starts to talk directly to the players. Save that one for Halloween night.
Don't do anything that'll get you shot.
Yeah,
put it that way.
Talk. You're allowed to talk and be nice. Still a
tied down. I mean, boiling water pulled on your thing.
We're back to the panic. Okay, well, there's only one last question, and that came from, again, on our Discord, Odysseus Observant, who has this to say: do Cthulhuid horrors count as demons? Well, Dave, do
in the most general sense, yes. In the sense of pitchforks and horns, not so much. It's from a different literary tradition or mythological tradition, even. But yeah, I mean, some games have both. Like Shadow of the Demon Lord, you've got different varieties of unworldly horrors. Tentacle things from the void, Fae, like, who do their Fae orange and blue morality things, and then you've got Hell. Hell is basically outcast Fae who turned into what we would call devils, and who encourage corruption in mortals because they feast on corruption from said mortal souls. After what if a soul gets corrupt enough, it goes to hell and becomes a snack for them.
I generally find that my look on it would be that they are not a difference of kind, but they're definitely a difference of type, if it makes sense. It's like it's a similar position of this is a entity which is beyond the human realm, as it were, but it works on very different rules from a traditional. Now you can have it's not a traditional demon. Maybe traditional demons are something else. If you have both in your setting, like, there's nothing wrong with a setting where people think demons are rule, and you pull out your bell book and your candle and you go, oh, gada boogada boogada, but actually you've just, like, by random chance, 1 out of every 2 or 3 blood-stained glyphs is actually in the language of the libraries of Leng or whatever, and you accidentally summon a Shoggoth, and you think you've summoned Satan's servant, but it's actually just a wandering galactic postman who's like, well, this planet seems to have far too much oxygen, we should have to do something about that. You can toy with that sort of relationship. I think in today's setting where you have both, you really want to play up the difference in that, not in power, like, well, you can have, like, your Cthulhus and such be the more powerful, but I would put them on the same level, but with very different views on things, where your Cthulhus are like, the demons want to, like, just destroy this reality and turn it to formless chaos, and the Cthulhus are like, no, man, like, even formless chaos is just such a temporary thing, like, what are you even doing? Like it's just like the have you not heard the pipes of Great Azathoth? He has it has a non-plan, an anti-plan. Why aren't you? We've already sorted this out 5 billion years ago. What's this whole hell thing? What's all that about?
Yeah, if you want to sort of slot them into the kind of the scale, they fall there in the chaotic neutral. It's not that they don't like you; they don't even have an opinion on you. What's this you nonsense? Yeah, I think largely the Cthulhu side of things is a kind of a style difference, a tone difference. You get a lot of the same results. Cthulhu's mythos includes cultists and seeking power and making deals with things beyond. In that way, they're neighbors to the traditional devils and demons.
If you wanted to draw a distinction between them, I think Cthulhu doesn't care. Demons care deeply about what's going on in this human souls business, and Cthulhu just has no idea why would you even care about that? But that's one take you would take on it. Yeah,
the demons and devils both are personally offended by sort of mortals in whatever shape and guise, and the Cthulhuoid pantheon. Actually, no real opinion. Sorry, didn't even notice you were there. I was just crushing reality. Right. So, okay. Can we talk about Innomine? I'm absolutely putting in the sound effect because that's the Steve Jackson game's take on the difference between the angelic and the demonic.
I believe it was originally derived from a French game, Innomine Satanas.
Yeah, I had that in my mind as well. Owen, could you set us straight on that?
Oh, I'm not a big Innomine stan, so I'm not sure. But I believe it was a French game.
That would have been my...
It was, yeah.
That was my take on it. And it was unusual in that you could basically play from both sides, and the critical rules were different depending on whether you were a angel or a devil. That 111 was great for the angelic half and really bad for the demons, and vice versa. 666 was
a 3d6 system with a generally I think it was 2 dice rolled and then a kind of a die. The last die indicated whether the roll would go in hell or heaven's favor, but of course if you got a critical 111 666, that decided the matter for that roll. It also had a sort of a choirs and there's a lot of musical sort of terminology and inspiration in the game as well. So thinking of choirs of angels, of course, and then the sort of more discordant pantheon of hell.
The whole choir thing hung around in a kind of a cult mythos and circles for a while as well, I think, where they had... that was a kind of whole thing of the Song of Angels and stuff, and was a kind of more conceptual, this is the more understandable thing that angels do, that angels are all bonds of the sound that, unifies all of the world sort of thing going on.
Like a creation song sort of thing.
Yeah, and it was about a Cold War, wasn't it, really, between like angels and devils, or angels and demons trying to corrupt or save people.
Yeah, I believe the setting itself, the guys who wrote the setting specifically left some of the big questions unanswered, primarily to get themselves out of the sorts of traps that you end up in if you attempt to answer the big questions regarding the true nature of good and evil, heaven and hell. So the ultimate powers in either case are kind of veiled. I don't think there's no stat block for God, and it kind of sidesteps that stuff to some extent, allowing you to not deeply offend any particular faith by nailing it down in your game. Not that anyone cares, but when they care, they really care. Right. So we've talked about quite a bit. Is there anything else we need to bring up before we close out this episode 666? Do we want to talk about how throwing bones to decide the future is inherently sort of occult activity?
In Roman times, the dice they made were often irregularly shaped and unbalanced because they knew they were controlled by the fates. It didn't matter like what shape the dice were; they would land the way the spirits willed, which probably meant that a couple of savvy people made a lot of money gambling in Rome.
Just the right kind of pig knuckle is a great way of scalping a soldier of assault.
Absolutely. So the original game was In Nomine Satanas / Magna Veritas,
Right.
which was In Nomine Satanas was the demonic player's guide, and Magna Veritas was the angelic player's guide. So and that was kind of basically it was a bit of a superhero game, and I think they modeled it a little bit for more, I would say, late 90s US sensibilities. So probably a little bit of like, when was Sandman? Because I would imagine Sandman's influence will be all over In Nomine.
Certainly, it's there in the tone. It's got that kind of sort of slightly.
It's late 90s as opposed to like Supernatural, which was mid-80s.
Yeah, that'd be an incredibly different take. The demons as pure possessors and kind of agents of destruction.
Okay. All right. Anyone want to make any suggestions for good devil and demon media to soak up? We've had a couple already. If there's anything on people's minds that for good inspiration for devils and demons in your games. Well, I'll go first then. I just something off the top of my head. For a long time, like most of us in the early 2000s, I read webcomics. And then for a long time I didn't. But I only recently discovered an absolutely cracking webcomic called Kill 6 Billion Demons. And it goes deep on some of the stuff we've talked about today. It lays out a whole hierarchy for devils and angels and demons and the mortals and others in between, set in a sort of an afterlife or a wheel-like universe that any player of D&D will recognize almost instantly. It's lavishly illustrated. It's very well written. It comes with long text pieces that accompany it in the form of fables and holy scripture surrounding this universe. It has a distinctly subcontinental feel in that it draws a lot of inspiration both visually and in the hierarchies from Indian and associate cultures in terms of, so it's obviously there's gods, there's demigods, there's demons, there's all sorts of various sorts and types, sword saints, samurai, etc. So check it out. Kill 6 Billion Demons. I haven't finished yet. I'm not even sure if it's still running.
I think it's still going.
It's still going.
But I'm looking forward to catching up.
The artist, I believe, is heavily involved in Lancer. The graphic design there,
and it's that's where I know them from, of course. So if you've seen the Lancer art style, you know just how visually imaginative this thing is. And for some of the early pages are just massive spreads that show the entirety of, well, this is what the heaven looks like, or this is what a defunct prime angel that's now being used as an apartment block looks like. It's got these great spreads that lay it all out in a sort of panoramic view. Real inspiration there for anyone who's thinking of running a game set in sort of an alternative to heaven or hell. So yeah, that's my suggestion. If anyone else got one, chime in.
If you want something that's you want to take a very off-kilter look at devils in a different sort of way, I would take a look at Bearers of Jade, which is the second book of the Shadowlands for L5R. And a lot of people hate this book because it kind of reimagined a section of the L5R conflict as, so these guys are fighting hell, and they're the front lines of humans versus hell, basically, and a lot of people got annoyed with this is like a bunch of Call of Cthulhu being dropping into my L4. This just makes L4 a horror game. Love the book. I think it's a fantastic book. Had an adventure cut for being effectively a little too extreme, a little too tough on the players, both mechanically and emotionally. I love the book. It's really well worth a look at. Basically, this is what it looks like if humans are taking on the front line of taking on hell, and not a nice, easy to deal with hell. Similarly, the world wound in Pathfinder, which features prominently in both the War of the Wrath of the Righteous adventure path and the new computer game that's out. If you want to see basically front lines of humans versus demons. That's like classic stuff. If you want to watch Christopher Walken as a vengeful archangel, check out The Prophecy, a very dodgy mid-90s film.
Dave, how about you? Any suggestions?
Any suggestions? I picked up something last year called Randy M's Delve to Hell. And it's a series of 26 maps, isometric, and the first one's a tavern, perfectly normal tavern, and then you go into the basement, and you go down through caverns, and it eventually ends up at the gate to hell, as in, lava stream and all. And it's all very detailed, and like a great little canvas to run a memorable dungeon delve. Like, the art is great fun. It's just lots going on there. It's worth a look anyway.
Yeah, isometric maps can do an awful lot of heavy lifting and storytelling, so well worth checking out. And finally, the warlord who rails against demons and devils alike, Scarr. Any suggestions?
Oh, man, I do not have a great suggestion here. Well, I do have one, I suppose. And I feel like maybe it's a bit classic, but I can't help when I think of like good handling and flexible use of demons in an RPG. I keep thinking back to Warhammer, both types, Warhammer Fantasy and Warhammer 40k. I think they have, mainly through years and years of not telling their RPG designers no, have come up with a whole bunch of different ways to express demons as a force. I think, like, a lot of the stuff for original Dark Heresy. You look into the books for original Dark Heresy on radical inquisitors and various cult activities that you have around that setting. And then there's always the 4 books for Black Crusade, which delve deep into the philosophies of the Chaos Gods. There's a whole bunch of different ways to express demons. You could have them as these subtle manipulators who are just sort of feeding power to fools on the material realm. You can have them as people being possessed and being slowly mutated but gaining incredible power. Or you could just have the warp open up and have half a dozen bloodthirsters just show up and start breaking people's everythings. It allows the full scope without really breaking its tone, which, you can talk about 40k's tone as much as you want, but, it allows for all these different approaches where you can have your subtle fight against fundamentally human foes, but which are being influenced by a demon, or you could just have a fist fight with Khorne if you really want.
It's great. It's a good shout. I still think there should be 8 Chaos Powers in Warhammer rather than the current 5 they have. But yeah, that's me.
Well, the fifth. Well, isn't the fifth like Malice and out of?
No, Malice is currently out of continuity. Really, 5th is the Horned Rat. So if you want to do, but I had a scheme for plotting in. Basically, I was throwing Malice in between, effectively making the 8 points, and you go, okay, well and then you throw in people whose purview is sort of, okay, who's between Khorne and Nurgle, and that's the Horned Rat, maybe, or who's between Tzeentch and Slaanesh, and you throw them in as kind of what metaphorical slice of the pie do they get, and like between like Tzeentch and Nurgle, you do something that's the Great Mutator or the Mother of Monsters who creates these creatures for the rest of them to use. That would slap right in there. And who's between kind of excess and the magic of you kind of try and slice out the pie like that and go, okay, but because there should be 8. It's an 8-pointed star. There should be 8 of them. And it's only the fact that GW at a certain point went, we're not being creative anymore, guys. We're stopping right here. This is our mythos. If you go back and read The Lost and the Damned and the 2 basically Realms of Chaos books, for years it never advanced past that. Every model had a greater demon, a demon foot soldier, a demon monster, and a demon mount. And that was it. That was the only thing any of them got. I'm like, this is meant to be the endless hordes of the Chaos Spawn. Why do they each have 4 guys? Because they're units in a wargame. And they didn't advance beyond that for years. Years and years and years of just reprinting and redoing those same set of models. And it's only relatively recently they actually started to put out anything that's new and different.
Fingers crossed they fill in a few more of those spokes.
Hopefully.
Okay, well, folks, that's it. You can snuff out that black candle, break the circle of salt, and put away your grimoires of illicit knowledge. For you have summoned us, we have discussed demons and devils, but for now, episode 666, this party's over. You've been listening to The Adventure Party. We're a ragtag collective of desperate souls, striving for truth in a world of tabletop gone mad. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter. You can email us at party@theadventuringparty.net. Although, between you and me, the best place to track us down is Discord. Check the show notes for a link. This podcast released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike version 3 license, which is like free, but with extra steps. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you next week.
If we went another 5 minutes, we could probably get it up to 1 hour, 6 minutes, and 6 seconds. But, that may be commitment to a bit that's too far.
True.
Speaking about bits, do we want to do the full Phenomenon song?
Not the full one, but...
well, no,
Like, it's not really a song, is it? Like, there's no lyrics.
Kind of a call and response. I'll just go and grab the Muppets version and use...
Well, that is the superior version.
And use that for... I'll insert it when we're editing this.
Should you put something in backwards, Mick?
Oh my god, okay.
Should we do a backwards talking section? Well, sit down.
I'll put that in backwards. Yeah. Oh my word. Okay, let's wrap it there.